Hi everyone, it's Bigfoot. The Appalachian Trail is full of surprises, and I had my fair share last year during my 2016 thru-hike. Today, I want to tell you the 5 biggest things that surprised me about my Appalachian Trail experience. All right, well, to start off, boiling this list down to 5 things was really difficult for me because there were quite a few things that surprised me. So I thought I'd actually keep the 6th one because I couldn't figure out which of the 6 I really wanted to get rid of, so I ranked them. So starting off, this will be kind of like the freebie or honorable mention, but one of the biggest surprises that I had on the trail was hiker boxes. They were the cornucopia of the trail. It was unbelievable how many things you could actually find in hiker boxes. When you're actually on the trail, it's a great practice to actually look in the hiker box before you actually go into town and purchase any food or purchase any items at an outfitter. There were many times that I actually found the things that I was looking for inside the hiker box. So take my word for it. Make sure you check hiker boxes, and you'd be surprised what kind of things you might find in them. Moving on into my top 5. Coming in at number 5 was Virginia really wasn't that easy. You're going to hear on the trail from pass-through hikers that Virginia is much easier than what you experience in the first 3 states. You'll hear this a lot at trail days because many of the through hikers, pass-through hikers are at trail days. And you'll be going into Virginia thinking that, yeah, this is going to be easier. It's going to flatten out. I'm going to be able to pick up miles. Now, some of this is true. You are going to be picking up miles, but that's more so because you're getting your trail legs at this time. However, most through hikers' perception, including myself, was Virginia was much more difficult than what we had heard. And because of this, because our perception was much more different than what we actually experienced and what we felt reality was, this made it really difficult from a mental standpoint. Now, add in the fact that Virginia is 550 miles long. When you have the perception that it's going to be much more easier than it was, and you have to be in that state for 550 miles, those 2 things combined make it really, really difficult, and that's where I believe many people get the Virginia blues. Now, when I look back on Virginia and I think about all the states and what I went through, especially what I hiked through in the last section, yeah, I'd probably say that Virginia is mild and is relatively easy. However, at the time, I didn't think that. So if you go into Virginia knowing it's going to be more difficult than what people say that it's going to be, I think this will help you out mentally, which in turn will make it easier. Number 4, I was surprised by how many hikers actually sent home their stoves. Now, to start off on the AT, I'd say 90 to 95% of the hikers actually had stoves. Now, as the miles clicked away and we got maybe somewhere after the first 100 or 200 miles of Virginia, you started seeing a change with hikers. We started getting lazy. People started to eat oatmeal instead of boil the water to make the oatmeal. They started eating ramen noodles whole out of the package instead of boiling them. They started buying stoveless food. And a lot of this was just because most of the hikers out there were just getting sick of boiling water, waiting for their food to be prepared to eat. And a lot of them just wanted to eat right away and just didn't want to deal with all the cooking and all those things. As the miles clicked away, a lot of hikers sent home their stoves. Now, if I took a guess, I'd probably say of the 90 to 95% of the hikers that actually had stoves in the beginning, I'd say a good 20 to 30% of the hikers actually sent home their stoves. And there were many folks on top of that that kept their stoves, but didn't use them the majority of the time. So this was something that surprised me. I was stoveless the whole entire time. I didn't really miss a stove because I did go into town so often. All in all, I think you'll be surprised with how many hikers end up going with a stoveless diet and send their stove home. And who knows, you may even be one of them. Number 3, I was surprised how fast I lost my fear of bears. Now, going through the Appalachian Trail when I started, I think with all of the experiences I've had on the trail, I might have experienced 2 or 3 bears in my entire life. So when I actually saw my first bear about 300 miles into my journey, it freaked me out. It was about 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock at night. It was getting dusk, and I really wasn't prepared for seeing a bear at that time.
Woo! Hey guys, day 19. We're about 2.5 miles from Laurel Fork Shelter. and I just saw my first bear on the trail. It was maybe 150 feet ahead of me. I was making lots of noise coming down because I've been zooming, and it just booked it. So I hope I don't see it again.
Now, I will tell you, this kind of affected me for the next 100 miles. I was always afraid, especially when it got closer to night, about seeing a bear. And I was by myself most of the time, so this made it even worse. But what I quickly found out as I continued to hike the Appalachian Trail and continued experiencing bears was that bears were much more afraid of us than we are ever of them. Now, this goes to say that you need to practice bear safety, and you should know all of the signs of what to look for and what to be aware of when it comes to bears. However, most of the time, bears are going to be deathly afraid of you. And anytime that they hear an unnatural noise, or if you sneak up on them, they are going to be hightailing it into the woods. Many times you might not even see them. You're just going to hear something big thumping and pounding through the woods. Now, I probably saw somewhere between 20 to 25 bears on my entire thru-hike experience. And there was a time where I actually came in contact with a mother and cubs. We were in the Shenandoahs, but we were at one of the waysides, and I felt really safe because we were a far distance away from all of that activity. But that would be one thing of anything that I would definitely be afraid of. I think it's a great practice to make noise when you're on the trail. If you especially are alone and you're not going to be talking to other hikers, that is an unnatural noise that bears will pick up on. For me, I always tap my trekking poles together every once in a while. This also helped with kind of just kicking off the dirt and leaves and things like that that would really come on my trekking poles. But this also sent the message to any of the wildlife, especially the bears out there, that something unnatural was coming, like me, and really prevented me from getting into a bad position. Anyway, you do need to be wary of bear activity. There are lots of areas, depending on the year that you go, that have high bear activity, basically due to areas that bears have become accustomed to hikers and getting into their food, which is always a really, really bad thing. I talked about that in one of my previous videos. But as long as you're following the rules, you're aware of what's going on, and you practice bear safety, you'll be fine. But honestly, bears were one of the things that I was least scared about on the trail. Number 2, I was surprised by how many hikers quit in Georgia. Now, when you do your research, you hear about maybe like 20% of the hikers quit by Neal's Gap. And, maybe around a quarter, if that, actually make it the entire trail. Well, I will tell you, no matter how much I read up and experienced, nothing could have prepared me for how many hikers that I met that wanted to wave the white flag so early in their journey. Many of these hikers actually just got done hiking the approach trail and really didn't even have more than 10, 15 miles under their belt on their thru hike, and they were already talking about quitting. This really just surprised me. And I've talked a lot about this in other videos about what kind of things to expect on the trail, as well as tips to lighten up to make it a more comfortable experience so you have a better chance of lasting on the trail and meeting whatever goal that you do have. But this was something that really surprised me. I guess attached to that was how surprised that I was with how many heavy packs I saw in the first 30 to 50 miles. There were many people that I met on the trail that had packs between 50 to 60 pounds. I think I even met somebody that had a 75-pound pack. I truly believe in hike your own hike. And there are things out there that people bring that will give them comfort. I totally believe in that. I had things like that myself. But there's a lot of things out there that you really don't need. And when you kind of boil down to the reasons that hikers do quit in Georgia, I think a lot of things do boil down to what their expectation was versus what their perception of the trail was. Their pack being way too heavy, which put them susceptible to injury. So I think if you can do a couple of those things, you just increase your chance of staying on the trail. And coming in at number 1, my biggest surprise of the trail was how difficult southern New York was. Now, when I say southern New York, I'm not comparing this to the Whites or southern Maine or some of the other sections, but I anticipated New York to be really easy. No one talked about New York. As a matter of fact, when I was in Marion, Virginia, I had a guy that was actually giving me a ride into town, and he was telling me about one of the guys he was following on the trail was doing like 30-mile days in New York. And I was, at the time, I'm just like, that's great. I'll be able to pick up some extra mileage. I'll really be able to stretch and do some 30s during that section. And when I got to New York, from the beginning of New York, heading northbound, all the way till just before Bear Mountain, it was a lot more difficult. And as a matter of fact, I remember saying to myself that I thought that that section of the trail was more difficult than any of the other sections that I had experienced from Georgia all the way to New York at that point. Now, looking back on everything, I think if I would have expected it to be more difficult than what I had heard, I think that in itself would have made it a lot more easy. When you get into southern New York and you look at the profile on AWOL's guide, it doesn't really give you justice. And what I mean by that is southern New York has a ton of really steep incline mountains, hills. I don't even call them mountains because I don't remember ever being above 2,000 feet of elevation. But you're going up basically these steep inclines, and they're only like 100, maybe 150 feet. But then they go straight down. It's almost kind of like the roller coaster, except I thought it was much more difficult than the roller coaster. So anyway, but you're going straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. And again, when you look at AWOL's guide, because they're so close together and they're not that tall, it just doesn't look like it's that hard. Now, I wasn't the only person that felt this way. When us hikers went around and talked, and I remember especially when we were in the middle of New York, many of the hikers that I spoke to all felt the same way. I shared with you one of the hikers that I met that was going at just an incredible speed. His name was Bullet. Bullet said the same thing about New York. He actually thought it was the toughest part of the trail up to that point. So it wasn't just me that had felt that. And I think if you go into it knowing that it's going to be much more difficult than what it might look like on the map, I think that at least will ease you a little bit on the mental side so you know what to expect. But for me, southern New York was my biggest surprise. Well, that wraps up the 5 or 6 biggest surprises that I experienced on the Appalachian Trail. Now, everyone's going to perceive things just a little bit differently, but the things that I shared were things that I not only felt myself, but what I heard from a lot of hikers. So anyway, be open to some of these things. And if anything, I just want to create maybe just a little bit more awareness about some of the things that I did bring up. But thanks everyone for staying tuned in. I'll see you guys soon. And remember to always follow Bigfoot.